That feeling when someone just vanishes. No leads, no answers, just this terrible uncertainty.
It's a horrible feeling, and it's something that, unfortunately, many families in Kenya have been grappling with.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really crucial and frankly concerning situation we need to dig into today.
We're looking at recent statements from Kenya's President, William Ruto, specifically about the return of abducted Kenyans.
Right, and contrasting what he said with reports from, well, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the KNCHR, and other sources too.
Yeah, the core question for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. Does President Ruto's information line up with what the KNCHR is saying?
And if not, what are those discrepancies? What could they mean? That's what we want to unpack.
Our main source here is a transcript from a Maisha TV Kenya YouTube video. It's helpful because it puts these different statements side by side.
Makes the contradictions quite stark, actually.
Okay.
Okay, so let's jump right in. May 12th, 2025, President Ruto is at a press conference. The president of Finland is there, too.
And he makes a very definitive statement.
Yeah, the quote is, "All the people who were abducted have been brought back to their families. Full stop."
Sounds conclusive, doesn't it? Like, case closed, everyone's home safe.
That's exactly how it sounds. But almost immediately, we hit a problem.
The KNCHR.
Yes. Their report, also from May 2025, states that 29 Kenyans are still missing.
29. So not quite all the people. That's a major contradiction right there.
It really is. One says everyone's back, the other says nearly 30 families are still waiting. What does that tell us straight away?
Well, it immediately casts doubt on the official narrative. It suggests there's a gap, potentially a significant one, between the government's public position and the reality being documented by a national human rights body.
So to understand that gap, we need some context, right? These abductions didn't happen in a vacuum.
Not at all. The source material points to 2024 as a really bad period for this in Kenya.
The KNCHR documented, what was it, 82 cases?
82 enforced disappearances just between June and December 2024. A worrying number.
And were these random, or was there a pattern?
The KNCHR report suggests a pattern, yeah. It seems like individuals who were critical of the finance bill and vocal young people were disproportionately targeted.
The source even names some specific examples. Brian Oembo, Bob Jaggi.
The Longton brothers as well. These are specific individuals reportedly abducted during that time. It points towards a possible link between speaking out and disappearing.
And the methods used sound terrifying. Armed men, unmarked vehicles, just taking people.
Imagine the families, searching police stations, morgues, frantically posting on social media, just desperate for any information. It's horrific.
And it wasn't just local groups raising alarms, was it?
No, international organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International also weighed in, and they pointed fingers, suggesting state security agencies might be involved.
Specifically the National Police Service and the National Intelligence Service.
Those were the agencies mentioned. Very serious allegations coming from major international bodies.
So before President Ruto made that statement in May 2025 saying everyone was back, what was the government's line? How did they respond initially to these claims back in 2024?
Initially, it was largely denial, or at least downplaying it significantly.
The source mentions the government spokesperson, Isaac Mua, calling the claims exaggerations.
Yes, exaggerations by political opponents, essentially dismissing the concerns. And the Inspector General of Police, Douglas Kanger, insisted no missing persons were in police custody.
Even President Ruto himself initially pushed back against the idea of enforced disappearances.
He did. He reportedly framed it as security forces carrying out lawful arrests, not abductions.
But that clashes with the KNCHR evidence, right? 82 documented cases, some apparently caught on CCTV.
Exactly. That documented evidence, especially things like CCTV footage mentioned in the source, made the simple denial narrative much harder to sustain. It presented a direct challenge.
Which perhaps explains the shift we saw on May 12, 2025. President Ruto goes from dismissing the issue to actually acknowledging abductions happened.
And even promising police reforms to stop it happening again? That's quite a turnaround in public messaging.
It is. It could suggest the evidence and maybe pressure, perhaps international pressure too, is becoming undeniable.
It certainly looks like a change driven by something. Acknowledging the problem and promising reform seems like a response, whether to evidence, public outcry, or, as you say, international scrutiny, especially with a foreign leader standing right there.
Okay, but here's the crucial bit, the real sticking point, our source highlights. Even after that admission, even after the promise of reform,
the KNCHR still says 29 Kenyans remain missing as of May 2025.
So the question hangs there. If all the people are back, where are those 29?
It's the central contradiction. It undermines the president's claim of resolution and leaves those families, nearly 30 of them, still in limbo, still without answers.
And there's another point the source raises: accountability. Despite acknowledging the abductions happened.
There haven't been reports of arrests linked to those 82 cases from 2024.
That seems significant. Acknowledging a wrong happened, but no apparent move to hold anyone responsible for it.
It raises serious questions about impunity, doesn't it? If these violations occurred, who is responsible and will they face consequences? The lack of arrests leaves that wide open.
The YouTube source we're drawing from floats a few ideas about why President Ruto might have made that "everyone is back" statement despite the KNCHR figures.
What are they suggesting?
Well, one idea is damage control. The question came up during an international press conference. Maybe it was just trying to manage the optics.
Plausible. What else?
Another thought is trying to sort of close the book on the issue publicly without having to fully admit state involvement, perhaps.
A way to move on without a full reckoning.
And the third suggestion is maybe protecting the security agencies that might have been involved.
Shielding them from scrutiny or consequences. It's possible all these factors play a role, isn't it? International pressure, domestic political considerations, protecting institutions. They could all be intertwined.
It's complex. Now, President Ruto also talked about shifting the police budget, giving more control to the Police Service Commission and the Inspector General. More autonomy for the police. How does that fit into this picture, especially with allegations against security forces? Does more autonomy help or hinder accountability here?
Well, on one hand, financial autonomy could be a step towards a more professional, independent police force. That's the argument for it. But in this specific context, with unanswered questions about past abuses potentially involving police elements, you have to ask about oversight. Does greater autonomy come with stronger, independent checks and balances?
Because if not,
it could potentially make it harder to investigate past actions or ensure accountability moving forward. It really highlights the need for robust oversight alongside any increase in police independence.
there's also a really grim point. The source touches on the fate of those still missing, the possibility that some might not have survived their abduction.
It's the unspoken fear in these situations. Enforced disappearance is horrific in itself, but the lack of information leaves open the terrible possibility of further harm, even death. It makes finding the truth even more urgent.
So, amidst all this uncertainty and contradiction, what's actually being done? Are people just accepting this situation?
Oh no, definitely not. There's pressure from several directions. The Law Society of Kenya, the KNCHR itself, they're pushing hard for proper investigation.
And the families?
The families are taking action too, filing habeas corpus cases, basically demanding the state produce their loved ones or explain their absence.
And does that work? The source mentioned the Lawton brothers.
Right. Their release in 2024 is cited as an example where legal action, likely combined with public pressure, did seem to have an effect. So it shows these avenues can sometimes yield results.
And there's wider pressure, too. Protests, campaigns.
Absolutely. Public protests, social media activism, plus sustained attention from groups like Amnesty International. It all keeps the spotlight on the issue. And, Kenya's courts do have a track record of sometimes challenging the government on human rights. That provides another potential path for seeking justice.
So wrapping up this part of our deep dive, it really boils down to this fundamental clash, doesn't it?
It does. The president's statement of resolution versus the KNCHR's data showing people are still missing, that gap is impossible to ignore.
It really throws into question the whole narrative around transparency and accountability on this issue.
And leaves us, and more importantly the families, still waiting for answers.
Okay, so as we finish this deep dive, let's just quickly recap the main inconsistencies we've talked about. First, that direct clash. President Ruto saying everyone abducted is back versus the KNCHR still counting 29 missing people.
Then there's the president's own shift from earlier denials or downplaying of abductions to later acknowledging they happened. A significant change in rhetoric.
And finally, despite that acknowledgement, there's this apparent lack of public information about accountability. No reported arrests in those 82 documented cases from 2024.
So considering all that, and kind of echoing the thought from the YouTube source we used, we want to leave you, the listener, with this question.
What does this whole situation, these conflicting stories, these unanswered questions, tell us about how transparency and accountability work, or maybe don't work, when you're dealing with really sensitive issues like state security and basic human rights.
What questions are still lingering for you after hearing about these different perspectives and the information presented?
It's definitely a complex situation with, as we've seen, some major inconsistencies still unresolved.
We really encourage you to keep following this story, look at different sources, and think about what it means, not just abstractly, but for the real people, the families still waiting for news, and for the principles of justice.